Picture this. A man standing tall in court, not hunched over, not trembling in shame, but smiling. His suit is pressed, his hair is neat. He carries himself not like a man fighting for his life, but like someone running for office. The jury listens closely, and at times they even laugh at his jokes. Reporters describe the way he speaks with the poise of a lawyer, the confidence of a politician, the charm of a man used to winning. People in the audience, some barely older than the people he harmed, lean forward in fascination. That man was a master of deception. He wasn't what people thought of when they imagined a perpetrator of evil. He didn't lurk in shadows with a crazed look in his eye. He wasn't the monster from nightmares. On the surface, he was the kind of man parents might have trusted, the kind of man neighbors might have admired. He was educated, ambitious, outwardly polite. He studied law. He volunteered on political campaigns. He shook hands, made friends, and gave speeches as if he were destined for power. He was, in every sense of the word, ordinary. But that's what made him unsettling, because behind that polished exterior lived a double life, a life so disturbing, so carefully hidden, that it shocked the nation when the truth finally emerged. Throughout a period of time, dark and disturbing secrets followed him wherever he traveled. College campuses, neighborhoods, parking lots, all became places where his darker side was revealed. The secrets followed him like a shadow, stretching across state lines, piling up faster than people could connect the dots. The truth that surfaced would forever change the way America thought about deception. Because deception, in this man's case, didn't come with wild eyes or messy hair. It came with a smile, a handshake, and the promise of trust. When he was finally caught, tried, and convicted, the world watched in disbelief. The media branded him one of the most infamous people in American history. His name became shorthand for charm turned dangerous, for how ordinary evil can look when it hides in plain sight. But here's where the story takes a turn few ever talk about. Because while the headlines obsessed over his misdeeds, while the cameras captured every second of his courtroom performance, while millions tuned in to watch this shocking fall from grace, something else was happening in the shadows. He wasn't just a headline. He wasn't just the man sitting in the defendant's chair. In the middle of the chaos, he became a husband. And then, not long after, a father. Yes, one of the darkest names in American history left behind something no one expected. A child. A daughter who never asked for his name. A daughter who never asked for the weight of his legacy. A daughter who inherited not fame, not fortune, but a shadow. The shadow of a man who fooled a nation. It's a detail history rarely lingers on, because it's uncomfortable. It's easy to look at him as a monster and close the book when the story ends at his public demise. But the truth is, his story didn't end in that chair. Because in the quiet corners of America, away from cameras and courtrooms, his story lived on in the life of his child. And to understand how that curse came to be, you have to look at the woman who stood by him when almost no one else did. Her name was the mother. Unlike the strangers who mailed this man letters once he became a national sensation, the mother wasn't a fan obsessed with headlines. She wasn't chasing infamy or fascinated by his darker side. No, she actually knew him long before the world did. In the early 1970s, the two worked together in a State Department. It was a place meant to help people, to bring communities together in moments of crisis. Ironically, it's also where the mother first crossed paths with one of history's most infamous individuals. To her, this man was nothing like the person the world would come to know. He was, in her eyes, intelligent, charming, respectful. She once described him as bright and kind. To the mother, he wasn't a headline. He was a colleague, someone she laughed with at the office, someone she truly believed in. So when he was arrested years later, accused of misdeeds that shocked the country, the mother simply couldn't reconcile the man she knew with the man in the headlines. She stood by him. While the evidence mounted, she refused to believe it. While prosecutors presented a case for a different man, she smiled at him from the gallery, convinced of his innocence. And he, always the manipulator, always the showman, took full advantage of that loyalty. Representing himself in court, he turned his high-profile case into a performance. Cameras captured his smirks, his interruptions, his arguments with the judge. He thrived on the attention. But then, in one of the most bizarre moments in American legal history, he pulled a stunt that stunned even seasoned reporters. During cross-examination, in the middle of his own legal proceedings, he asked the mother to marry him. The courtroom gasped. The mother smiled. And here's the shocking part. Under state law at the time, a declaration of marriage made in front of a judge counted as a legal wedding. So with no flowers, no music, no chapel, and no family, he got married, right there in the courtroom. The prosecutors were speechless. The jury sat stunned. For him, it was the ultimate act of control, a way to seize the spotlight, to turn a high-profile case into a stage for his own twisted sense of drama. And the mother? She said yes, without hesitation. In that instant, he was not just a defendant facing the end of his life. He was a husband. And the mother, in her eyes, was not just a supporter. She was now his wife, bonded to him by law. But the real shock didn't come in that moment. It came later, because the mother didn't just marry him, she had his child. Think about that for a second. While the world was focused on his actions, while people tried to make sense of everything, while reporters dissected every detail of his high-profile case, the mother was quietly carrying the next chapter of his story. In the early 1980s, the mother gave birth to a baby girl. The world wanted to know how. How does a man in a high-security facility father a child? Rumors swirled. Some whispered about private moments during prison visits. Others claimed guards turned a blind eye. No one ever confirmed the truth, but the result was undeniable. The man America called a monster had become a father, and in that single moment, the story of this infamous figure shifted. Because now it wasn't just about the lives he impacted. It was also about the innocent life he created, a child who would never escape the weight of his name. Her name was the daughter. Born in the early 1980s, the daughter was the only known child of the infamous figure. And instantly, her very existence raised questions the world couldn't stop asking. How does a man in a high-security facility, locked away and sentenced to his final days, suddenly become a father? There were rumors. Some whispered about secret encounters during visits. Others speculated about guards turning a blind eye to moments that should never have been possible. The truth remains debated to this day. What matters is not the how, but the fact that it happened. Because with the birth of the daughter, one of the darkest names in American history suddenly had a daughter. And that child, from the moment she took her first breath, carried a last name that would never be free of infamy. Imagine this. You're learning to walk, to talk, to laugh, all while your father's face dominates the evening news as the ultimate symbol of a dark side. You're taking your first steps while newspapers scream his name in bold letters. You're forming your first words while strangers whisper that your last name is burdened. The daughter never asked for her father's past, yet she was tied to it forever. Her mother, the mother, understood the danger of that connection. The mother tried to shield her daughter with everything she had. She refused to let photographers capture her child. She refused to reveal even the smallest detail. She defended him in interviews, painting him as misunderstood, desperately trying to preserve some version of a father her daughter could believe in. But as the years dragged on and the evidence against the man became undeniable, even the mother could no longer live in denial. The daughter was still a toddler when her father's final court date drew near. By that time, the mother had stopped bringing her to the prison. The loyalty that once looked unshakable had finally cracked. It was as though the mother quietly understood something chilling. If her daughter ever had a chance at a normal life, she needed to be separated from the man, and so she began to pull away. By the time his legal saga ended in the late 1980s, the mother and the daughter were already gone from the spotlight. When the cameras swarmed outside the prison gates, when crowds gathered to mark the occasion, when the world celebrated the end of his infamous public life, the daughter wasn't there. She was far away, hidden by a mother who finally realized that escape was the only form of protection left. And then, they vanished. No press conference, no public statement, no farewell. The mother took her daughter and disappeared into the shadows of anonymity. To this day, no one knows for certain where the daughter is, or even what name she lives under. Some believe the mother changed both their identities, moving them across the country. Others claim the daughter grew up under a completely new life, so ordinary and quiet that nobody would ever suspect who her father was. But one thing is undeniable. The daughter inherited not money, not fame, not opportunity, but a shadow that follows her everywhere, even in silence. Somewhere in the world today, there is a woman in her early 40s. She might be a mother herself. She might have a career, friends, even neighbors who know her only as someone ordinary. They may laugh with her, share coffee with her, wave to her on the street, never knowing the secret she carries in her bloodline. Her name at birth was a burden, and though she disappeared from the public eye, the weight of her father's legacy never disappeared from her life. On a day in the late 1980s, the public chapter of his life came to its final shocking end. Outside the state prison, the atmosphere was unlike anything you'd expect for such a momentous occasion. Hundreds of people gathered, eager to mark the day. They held signs, some mocking, some triumphant. T-shirts were sold with slogans commemorating the event. Chants rose from the crowd as though it were a sporting event. The media swarmed in from every direction. Television crews set up lights. Reporters gave live updates. For many Americans, the resolution of this legal saga wasn't just justice, it was spectacle. But inside the prison walls, there was silence. No loyal wife, No daughter. No, the mother. The woman who once sat smiling in the courtroom, defending him against all odds, had vanished long before the final act. She hadn't visited him in years. She hadn't written him letters. And she certainly wasn't there to watch the end of the man she once loved. When the final legal step was taken and his public life concluded, the story that consumed the nation seemed to reach its final page. But for the mother and the daughter, it was just the beginning of a new chapter. One written in shadows. Because after that day, both mother and daughter disappeared. There was no press statement, no explanation. The mother quietly severed all ties, took her child, and walked away from the circus that surrounded his name. And once she did, she never came back. What happened next remains one of the most enduring mysteries connected to his legacy. Some say the mother changed her name and her daughter's, moving them across the country under fresh identities. Others speculate she relocated to another continent entirely, determined to place oceans between her child and his infamy. A few believe the daughter grew up quietly in America, blending into the crowd so completely that no one would ever suspect who her father was. But the truth is, nobody knows for certain. And that silence speaks volumes. Think about it. Somewhere in the world today, a woman in her early 40s is living an ordinary life, or at least trying to. She may go to the grocery store. She may have a job. She may have friends who know her as just another neighbor, just another face in the crowd. And yet behind that everyday existence lies a secret she never chose. That half her DNA belongs to the infamous figure. She didn't ask for the legacy of infamy attached to her last name. She didn't ask to be born into one of history's darkest stories. But she carries it all the same. The daughter is the part of this story almost no one talks about. Not the lawyers who prosecuted him. Not the journalists who covered every detail of the trial. Not the experts who dissect his crimes to this day. No, she's not part of the headlines. She's not part of the documentaries. She's not even part of the public memory. She is the innocent child left behind, the one person forever bound to him by blood, yet forced to live in complete silence. And perhaps that's the only way she could ever survive. He is gone. His ashes scattered. His name permanently carved into American history as a symbol of darkness, wearing the mask of charm. But here's the chilling truth. His story didn't end with the final legal judgment. Because misdeeds like his don't just cause pain in the moment. They echo. They ripple. The people impacted by his actions never truly healed. Loved ones grew old carrying grief they could never set down. Those who endured lived with scars, some visible, many invisible, that would shape the rest of their lives. And then there was one more casualty, a name barely whispered in the decades since, not a victim in the traditional sense, but a child forced to grow up with a curse she never asked for. Her name was a burden, born into a storm she didn't create. The daughter inherited the heaviest burden of all, a last name that carried a heavy legacy wherever it was spoken. What does it mean to live with that legacy? To know that the world sees your father not as a man but as the embodiment of darkness. Imagine trying to introduce yourself and realizing you can never share your true last name. Imagine sitting in a classroom as a child hoping no teacher, no student ever makes the connection. Imagine trying to build a career or a relationship while knowing that one background check, one curious Google search could expose everything. And then imagine becoming a parent yourself, raising your own children, protecting them from the world, all while knowing that one day they might discover who their grandfather really was. That is the curse of being his child. It's a curse of silence, a curse of secrecy, a life lived in hiding. Not because of what you did, but because of who your father was. And maybe that's why she never gave interviews. Maybe that's why she never wrote a book, never signed a TV deal, never tried to cash in on her father's name the way so many others around him did. For her, survival meant vanishing. The infamous figure fooled the world with a smile. He made juries laugh. He charmed people who came to watch him in court. He turned his high-profile case into a stage show, a bizarre performance that blurred the line between his actions and spectacle. But in the end, what he left behind wasn't just headlines. It wasn't just stories of his past in newspapers or documentaries replayed for decades. What he left behind was a daughter who has had to live every single day with the knowledge of who her father was and the silence that comes with carrying that truth. And that may be the most haunting legacy of all. The legal end to his life came, but his ghost walks on. Not in the prison where he spent his final years. Not in the records of his past deeds frozen in history books. His ghost lingers in the quiet life of a woman who never chose this story but has been bound to it since birth. Her name is a burden. You may never see her face, but you'll never forget her curse.